If you've watched my show for a decade or more, first things first, my apologies. And second, you'd know by now that I was pointing out long before the Aspies at IGN that the economics of AAA gaming were about as sustainable as a bucket of Ben & Jerry's and Movie Bob's mini fridge. But something peculiar has occurred of late. Suddenly, seemingly unbidden and unsolicited, the Sony-falating, TDS-afflicted intern goose and Game & Journo jagoffs have abrupted upon reality, admitting outright that the modern economics of the AAA gaming industry should be wearing a top hat, tailcoat, and spats.
An anonymous publisher admits that development costs for one of its franchises reached $660 million, with $550 million of marketing costs on top, which makes it a $1.2 billion game. To put that into perspective, Minecraft, the world's best-selling video game of all time, only broke $3 billion last year, and keep in mind that's what it made since it launched way back in 2011. The realities of these budgets mean entire publishing houses are massively overstretched and are now desperately facing the consequences. If their developers' huge projects don't make money immediately, they gotta go.
Sure, it took them 10 years, but it's like a femboys period. Better late than never. While their actual arguments are also like a femboys period. Chemically induced and largely imaginary. Making a 9-minute twink piece about AAA's implosion while explicitly avoiding any mention of the single biggest BioWare bomb to burst all year, Faggot Age Railguard, is like making a snooze-worthy 8-hour nautical disaster video essay without once uttering the word Titanic. Or for that matter, without old-timey clothes or a faggy lisp. Watching the autismo knots at IGN start out slamming uncut China White cope into their crank vein, trumpeting Veilguard's superlative concurrent player count of 70,000 that not only plummeted like a CCP submarine immediately after, but was utterly dwarfed by almost any other game in its genre, including those with a fraction of a microfraction of its budget, Baldur's Gate 3, at which point they progressed to more measured assertions, such as when one IGN analyst predicted an uphill battle for the game in terms of sales. Until now, here we sit with IGN all but mute as the actual BioWare developers are now openly admitting the game's sales were more undershot than P. Diddy's jawline. Don't worry, Diddles, you'll need extra pliable mandible joints where you're headed. But Veilguard is only the latest affront to the finance department. In 2020, with everyone cowering indoors to escape the sniffles, it was expected that gaming revenue would skyrocket, and as such, the entire industry hired at a rapacious rate. I mean, sure, the games had to be shit out by remote from the comfort of your cat fort, and the results were more up and down than Destiny's head on a fat dude's dong, but in the near term, there was a serious spike in sales. That is, at first. What you have to understand is that video games take longer to release than January 6th detainees. Look no further than the decade-long development of the Final Fantasy Boy Band Edition in 2016, the 8-year Cyberpunk 2077 cycle, or everyone's favorite interactive movie mirage, Star Citizen, which at this rate should be released around the time we've all achieved our Star Citizenship. Point being, the games that caused sales to explode in 2020 had been a broiling in the crock pot for a half-decade or more, and as such, were a product of a relatively traditional funding and development arrangement. The current crop of commie crap was greenlit during the boof-coof. In an era where China were pulling up to EA and Ubisoft HQ with a dump truck full of ESG and DEI dollars, and in a time when costs were skyrocketing and the profit margins were thinner than Pelosi's eyebrow pencil, ESG consultants and their apparently inexhaustible cash reserves were all but irresistible. Fast forward 4 years, and these Shycom chickens have come home to roost. From Comincord to Combustborn, what we're witnessing at present is the multicolor-coiffed, hairy armpitted progeny of ESG-infused COVID-era crap concentrate, and the results are uglier than AEW's audience, all 12 of them, with industry insiders admitting a major AAA release can cost upwards of $600 million to a full-blown bill, with well over half of that cyclopean figure devoted solely to marketing, something gamers will do for you for free if you'd only release a game that doesn't blow and suck simultaneously. You already had profit margins thinner than tissue paper, but by seeking out an illusory audience that spends more on blue hair dye and hormone blockers than games, you've carved that tissue paper into quarters lengthwise. And the studios that have doubled, tripled, and octupled down on the pinko nonsense the hardest also happen to be the ones we now refer to in the past tense. Arcane Austin were one of the first studios to provide Anita Sarkeesian with a gainful consulting gig, resulting in a Girl Boss bedecked Dishonored sequel, an overrated reboot of Prey, suck it, and a vampire game that sucked for all the wrong reasons, Spedfall. And now Arcane Austin are deader than the Democratic platform. You know, there's something divinely poetic about a company called Arcane being a thing of the past. But they ain't alone in the hoary halls of unemployment. Volition and Firewalk are dining on Dodo and Gehenna, while every other week brings a renewed round of layoffs at EA and Activision. By this point next year, I fully anticipate there will be one guy left at Activision who will promptly lay off himself. And while the gaming industry is about as transparent as Iranian lingerie, the number of layoffs in the 2024 calendar year alone are already reputed to have risen between 20 and 30,000 pronoun people. For comparison, the actively imploding OceanGate sub that is modern Hollywood actually added 12,000 jobs in January. I repeat, in 2024, the video game industry lost more jobs on average than the long-dead, half-moldered movie industry, who itself ain't exactly lighting the box office on fire. In 2024, Paramount laid off 8% of its workforce. The only Marvel movie to make bank was Deadpool, and that's because it pinched a pearly shit on the very idea of Marvel movies. And I confess I'm beginning to doubt the premise of Mission Impossible now that we're 8 missions deep. But in gaming, it appears the only impossible mission is turning a profit. Granted, Star Wars Outlaws blew up, in a Death Star sense, paired with a dewokifying delay for Assassin's Creed Afro Samurai Edition. It's no wonder Ubisoft are now in danger of what amounts to a hostile takeover by Tencent, who, as I reminded you in my exporter of ESG rant, are in fact a direct and active arm of the CCP. See the play here, people? Fund ESG, ban it back home in China. When Western competition collapses, buy it at a bargain price. Call it Comintern corporate espionage, but deny its existence at your peril, because Ubisoft, bargaining as they are right now for the right to retain the Guillemot family as they're gobbled up by the Shycoms, no longer enjoy that singular luxury. But frankly, this hustle exposes itself like Pee-wee Herman. I mean, if gender diversity is all important, why is every Chinese game publisher a bigger sausage fest than Der Wiener Schnitzel? It just goes to prove Razor's golden rule of gaming. Female game developers are like wireless controllers. They don't work outside of the sync region. I'm Razor Fist. Spell my name correctly when you steal that joke. And Godspeed!
If we never get another Dragon Age, at least it got to go out on a high note.
Even if that means our world has to burn.